opening. Mr. Scarborough, may I appoint you as a voting member tonight? Thank you. Item number 3 are public comments. If there are any comments to be made from the public on any item that is not on tonight's agenda, we'd be happy to hear from you. Hearing none and seeing none, we'll move on to item number 4, the approval of the July 16th, 2009 minutes, which were mailed to us. There are 3 pages. Does anybody have any comments on the first page? Excuse me. Moving on to page number 2. I noticed three things, so I'm going to jump into it. On the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9th bullet down where it says further discussion ensured, I believe that should say further discussion ensued. And then down in the public hearing, are we now leaving last names out?
I'm sure they just said.
Okay, so
No,
do we have the spelling from the sign-in sheet? It was Kilfoyle, was it? Mr. Kilfoyle?
Okay.
Does that sound right?
All right. I'll check it.
Okay, and then in the second from the last bullet that begins with Jack Scarborough, it says the motion passed in favor of approving the application. Are we required to actually list what the vote was? Because
Yeah, we should.
I believe there was 1 nay vote.
That's right.
And everybody else was aye. Are there any other comments or concerns on this page? Yes, Mr. Kelly.
Ken, I think that there's a really abbreviated section about that hospital and the rubbish. I think there should be more in those meetings because there was quite a discussion and the fellow, discussed that he wasn't in favor of it and everything else. I think they really ran this one over and didn't explain it the way, didn't put in the not full discussion, but even a thumbnail sketch of the discussion that went on.
So in addition to the discussion of him voicing his concerns with the dumpster location, the visual, and the noise impact, and his...
That's an overture. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's not what went on with the discussion. It's just,
would you like to add?
That's all. They can do whatever they want with it.
Well, is there a summary that you would like to add here?
No, I think they should probably go back over the minutes and see actually what was said and who said it and stuff like that, and find out a little bit more about the discussion and just run it over quickly like they have. The other things they go in great detail. And this one didn't happen to go in great detail. They just said, well, there was a discussion about a few things, and that's it. That's my opinion. Mm-hmm. Do whatever you want with it. So
seeing that this section it only has 2 bullets compared to the section above it before the public hearing, which has several bullets, do we want to ask the person who does this transcription to take a second look at that section, or?
I guess if that's what the board wants.
No, that's what I'm asking the board. Do we want to?
I would recommend that we do.
Okay. I do want to point out that there was a couple meetings where they said the minutes are too long, we want them shortened. So, we just want to be clear with our minute person so their head's not spinning. Long, short, long, short,
I guess if you're going to thumbnail sketch it, you might as well do it all that way. Don't do one in great detail and the other one just saying, well, there was a meeting. be fair about everything, okay? That's all I can say.
I think everyone's in agreement with that. In the spirit of fairness, maybe what we can do is we can ask for this section to be fleshed out a little bit more, and we could actually compare it and see if we have a sense that a more thorough description would benefit the minutes. And so maybe we want to come back to this.
Yeah, I mean, there's two suggestions. Either, I can convey this to the person that does our minutes for future meetings, or I could have him go back and look back. But if we have him go back and look back, I mean, just keep in mind he charges by the hour, so, think of how much, it's worth it. I mean, we could just do it as a future direction, or I can convey that to him, but just keep in mind that he charges so much per hour. So.
Mr. Scarborough?
If I may, Mr. Chair, I think that John has a good point. We need to show as thoroughly as we can both sides of the positions that we're taking. And I would recommend that we ask for a review. The votes cast, the outcome was what it was. But as far as identifying the arguments, I think it would be fair.
Mr. Ahern?
Probably close to a year ago, we had these discussions, and the minutes were just so long, and we thought it was getting out of hand, and there were many that voiced the concerns that maybe we need to shorten it a little bit. There was also the fact that we have the tapes that are kept for a certain length of time, that if someone really wanted to, they could go back and review the tape. How long are those tapes kept?
Oh, we keep them, Jamie?
Video is archived indefinitely.
So
Indefinitely.
So you could always go back to it, and what we really, thank you, Jamie.
And also, it's not just a tape, it's a CD, so you see the visual, you see the voice, and we check those out. So whoever wants it can check it out.
I think
so it's even more than just a tape. You got the whole visual.
As long as we get, what our outcome is and what we direct to be done, I think that is the part that really needs to be clear. And maybe there are issues that come before us that need to be flushed out a little bit more, and maybe some that don't. I have no problem with that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Kelly.
I think minutes are not supposed to be detailed. They're supposed to be a summarization of what has gone on. I'm just saying that in it, and I've fought this for ever since I've been sitting in the audience, ever since I've been sitting on boards. It always seems to be that there's some things are scooted over, and there's some things that are in real detail. All I'm saying is, if you're going to make it a thumbnail sketch, do it for everything. Don't make one that is favorable to certain people in the town and go in great detail, and other things that might be a little objectionable, run that over like the Roadrunner. So I'm not saying make the minutes any longer. I'm just saying make sure that the information is fair to everybody. Mm-hmm. It's, you could just say the meeting opened and ended. I don't care, but but at least don't try to wind it a certain way for one person or the other.
Okay,
and I'm
Mr.
not saying this is done that way, but I'm just saying that there appears to be done that way.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Scarborough.
And I guess for my point, I would simply like to clarify and say to Mr. Ahern, I agree with you, and that we still, I think, owe it to the townspeople to offer the salient points of each argument, and they can be bulletized and not take up a lot of space. But I think they need to have fair information regarding why and what the decision was.
People can say that they can go to the CD. People don't go to the CD. People, Marion said, well, it's going to cost a lot more money to do it. Well, if they had done it right in the first place, it wouldn't cost a lot more money, and it would have cost the same amount of money if they had made a reasonable attempt to say what went on at that meeting. So I don't buy the fact that it's going to cost a lot more money.
No. I just want a clarification of, do you want this as a direction for future, or do you want him to go back on these minutes? That's all. I mean, for direction for future, no, that won't cost us.
Minutes and minutes, they're going to be shoved back in the archives anyway, so it doesn't really make any difference. I'm just saying that if somebody comes up and wants to see what went on in that meeting, they wouldn't see there was any importance to that at all, and the one just before that, they would figure that's really important.
It seems to me, I think what Mr. Kelly is saying is that there is a disproportionate number of bullets on sort of one side of the page, and just 2 bullets kind of wrapping everything up. And maybe what would be useful is for us to see how just this one section, from the discussion moving back to the board at 7 p.m. to the vote, how that would look. That just that section would look if it was fleshed out in more detail, and we can come back and see if we feel that there was anything that was missed, and so we can make sure that that we have a sense of fairness. I mean,
Okay,
I'm sure the person taking the minutes wants to feel like they know exactly what we want, and if we actually have something to compared to the last time, then they actually have a pretty good gauge as to what we're looking for.
Okay, so you do want me to go back and ask him to flesh that part out? Or do we just want this as a future direction? Because I thought John's just saying, in the future, do it this way.
But we've been saying that for over a year, as Mr. Ahern pointed out. I mean, this kind of goes back and forth, and we want more, we want less.
Right.
And what does that mean? If we actually have something tangible that we can say, here's the brief version, because we have the brief version.
Okay, so you want him to go back and redo it then? I mean, do a fleshed out version.
Does he have to go back to do it, or does somebody else, can somebody else just...
Well, it's on the CD. I mean, do you want to transcribe that section?
Whoever wants to do it can do
I
it.
don't know whether you want to just review it to see if... I think I think either that, take some of the other out, I don't care what happens, but I'm just saying that it just seems that certain things are slid over and other things are gone in great detail, and whether it's for future or whether it's now, I don't care. It's just the idea is that we keep saying that and we keep getting the same results of certain people having an essay on it and the other people having a thumbnail sketch on it, and I think it should be reviewed before we get it and make sure that everything is abbreviated so that everybody gets a fair shake.
So I think we're talking about a 20-minute section, approximately. Not the whole minutes, just that 20-minute section.
Okay. I mean, if my instructions are to go contact him and say, go back through the CD and recopy that 20 minutes, we can do that. Okay.
Well, what's the board's feeling? I mean, we could just say, make them longer, make them more balanced.
I mean,
I think anything,
Yes, Mr. Ahern.
I would like to see, if we do make any changes, let's just make it for the future. That's my feeling.
I mean, to be honest, I mean, this is my own personal opinion. I think they did a good job. I mean, the part that has more bullets, it's about the proposal that the hospital made. So these are the statements. This is the application. The resident did voice concerns about the dumpster location, the voice and the noise. That's accurate. I don't.
Well, where
I understand about being fair, but I mean, I think he covered what happened.
Where I'm coming from is actually exactly your position. I think these minutes are fine. And I think that if we look at the 10 or 15 minutes that is in question right now, we'll be able to make a determination. Did we gain anything by having really extensive minutes covering this 15 minutes, or did the person do the job right the first time?
I mean, I don't think we have to belabor it, but I mean, you're talking about him going and then writing 8-9 pages on just that 10 minutes. Then Mr. So-and-so said this, then he said this, then he said that. Then bring it back to you guys, so you'll have the 20-minute, I mean, the 20-page version, and you'll have the 1-page version, and then you'll compare the two, right? Is that what you want? I mean,
that isn't what minutes are. Minutes are abbreviated, and which is good on that back part, but the front part, I just don't think it's, I don't know. I guess I'm just odd. So I like to see things.
Mr. Sutcliffe?
I'm wondering if it would be easier for members of the board to look at the CD and judge for themselves if these are accurate, and then if there's a problem, we'll revisit it?
Yeah, I mean, it's another reason why I send it out way in advance, a week ahead of time or 2 weeks. You know, you can go through it, and if there's something else that you remember, add. You can just, you know, email me, give me a hard copy, however you want to do it. I have no problem adding stuff.
Mr. Ayer?
And we also got to remember, there's some meetings that went past midnight, and we got to keep it brief, because when those meetings start to happen, we're going to have 15-page minutes all over again. So we need to make sure that we condition them that brief is better. Get the salient points, but keep it extremely brief.
They were not minutes.
Yeah.
In those times.
Well,
the definition of minutes is an abstract of the meeting, and it has nothing to do with the detail of the meeting. That's the definition of minutes.
So I'm going to take it that if we don't, so we don't move forward with a motion to send this back for further discussion, and we do accept a motion that these minutes are approved as is with the amendments, that we're comfortable and very happy with the service that we're getting from our minute taker.
Mr. Chair, if
Yes.
I may, I'd like to move that we accept the minutes as written, and with a condition that we, in the future, may ensure that we have equal time given to the oppositions or positives as far as speaking to the issue at hand.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'm going to jump in myself with a little, in the discussion part of this motion. It'd be nice if we got to page 3 before we accepted these minutes, and also that the amendment said that these were accepted, rather the motion said that these minutes were accepted as amended.
Yes.
Is that a friendly?
Yes.
Okay, first and seconder have said that. Are you willing to wait until we get to the third page?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So under the guise of discussion, anything on page 3? Okay, hearing no comments, I will take a vote on the motion. All in favor of accepting these minutes as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. So our minute taker should take that as a vote of confidence. All right, moving on to item number 5, we have 3 items of correspondence. Would the town planner like to say anything about those?
Right, so we got a lot of, you know, newsletters, and everyone's welcome to come by my office and look through it if there's anything they want that holds their interest. And then there's the save the date for October 8th, 2009. That's for the NCC, North Country Council Annual Meeting, and it will be at the Attitash Grand Summit Hotel. At 4:30 is the business meeting, 5 o'clock the cocktail reception, at 6 o'clock is the dinner. So just mark your calendar that that's going to be the North Country Council Annual Meeting. And the rest, as I said, were newsletters from NHDES, Drinking Water Source Protection Program. So I keep a copy in a file, and anyone that wants copies can just let me know.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 6, the report of committees. Does Mr. Kelly have anything from the Board of Selectmen?
Not really. The paving on South Main Street has been done after a lot of discussion and everything. We're talking about some grants in regards to the stimulus money that has been floating around. And the budget is already accepted. We're waiting for the auditor to go over it and make sure everything's okay.
Thank you. Does Mr. Wilson have anything from the Conservation Commission?
There's nothing to report tonight.
Thank you. Does the town planner, Mr. Kelly, have anything from North Country Council?
Actually, I went to a seminar about Transportation Enhancement Grant, and I've put in a letter of intent for the Transportation Enhancement Grant, and I'll just save that for discussion for when we talk about our Femi River Walk, which is
Thank you.
item in new business.
Thank you. Anything from the Zoning Board of Adjustment?
Yeah, we looked at a bed and breakfast, that request for 8 Pleasant Street, and that was granted by the Zoning Board of Adjustment to allow them to do a bed and breakfast at this home. Also, a brief has been filed by John Radigan to the Supreme Court concerning the case of Batchelder versus the Zoning Board of Adjustment, which concerns the Lowe's property. So that needed to be filed by August 2nd. It was filed by August 2nd, and now we're waiting to hear when they're going to listen to that court case.
Thank you. Does Mr. Scarborough or Ms. Bishop have anything from the Water and Sewer District?
I attended the last 2 meetings, and they're predominantly administrative. They sign a lot of bills. I was the only audience in both meetings, and that's really it.
Ms. Bishop, do you have any? No. Okay. How about the Femi River?
There's some interesting activity there. There's been a change to RS 484A or 482A that requires notification of any activity proposed by anyone within a quarter mile of the designated river, which the Femi is. And that has to be filed with the Femi River Local Advisory Committee before it can be forwarded to the state for approval. And it's, I unfortunately forgot to bring copies, but will provide them to Miriam, and I'll also drop some off to the Plymouth Water and Sewer District. Other than that, our next meeting will be the 25th, and the proposal that's under review is going to be presented then.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
You've reported on sewers, rivers, and now how about a lake report?
I'm the Newfound Lake Region Watershed Steering Committee, which I'm on, is in the process as we speak of going over their final draft of their watershed protection master plan. We'll have another meeting on the 24th, and its rollout will be on the 28th.
Terrific. And another water theme for the association?
They're in the middle of a fundraising drive. It may be a possibility that the Femi River Committee can possibly help them in some regard. To step back, though, the Femi River Group is also in need of updating their master plan for the watershed. So that'll be something I'll tackle.
Okay. And how about the Plymouth Regional Emergency Management Committee?
We had our first meeting introducing Donna Quinn, and it went very well. Primary discussions were concerned with emergency response, identification that the local authorities here, Chief Cogston and Chief Temporino, are going to be completely tied up in their own business, so we'd have to draw on mutual aid. And we had a big discussion about just what would cause us to trigger the whole process for us to engage Plymouth State, mutual assistance, activate our committee to manage the emergency, which is predominantly focused on a pandemic, H1N1. Mm-hmm. And we also then expanded it to say that there are going to be other non-natural emergencies that we could potentially have to respond to that may not even be in the Plymouth region or in the Plymouth region but not impact Plymouth. Sanctuaries for people if there's raging forest fire somewhere, for example, an airplane crash in who knows where, a building somewhere, and we have to deal with all the victims, mm-hmm. and they're overwhelmed. So that was generally, it was a very stimulating meeting, very, very good. We had representatives from a variety of communities, and as well as Plymouth reps, and it was very good, very productive.
Great. Thank you very much. And finally, 10th report from the town planner.
Right. One thing that we left out about the Board of Selectmen meeting was that the developer, Mike McGinley, that was talking about putting the traffic light on Boulder Point Drive and Tenny Mountain Highway, so he's going ahead with that. So he's hired his engineer, they've got their plans, but they brought it before the Board of Selectmen because it really doesn't involve planning, it just has to do with the traffic control. So that was another thing that the board covered too. But, you know, just to let you know that they're going ahead with those plans to put a traffic light there, which will open up development on Boulder Point Drive. Oh, and he's going to have to relocate the road by 42 feet, just to make it safer. So,
Thank you. Moving on to item number 7, new business. We have 2 items of new business. The first is the Femi Corridor Management Plan and Resource Mapping. Is Tara Bamford here? Would you like us to rearrange where we're sitting for this presentation at some point?
That would work better than getting it in your eyes. So we'll use the wall behind you, so at least
All right.
5 feet.
so if you guys just want to, you can sit over here.
Thanks for inviting me back to talk some more about some of the water resource planning activities we have going on in the region. I was here briefly, was it December, I think, one of your agendas that you had upcoming zoning amendments. So I went through things pretty fast and wanted a chance to come back and walk through the steps of this co-occurrence mapping project a little bit more carefully and be able to answer any questions. This project was done with a grant from DES. It was led by the GIS folks at Lakes Region, and our part in it is to help with the outreach in our communities. As you can see, the Pemigewasset watershed covers a lot of territory. Actually, parts of 36 municipalities are within the watershed, all the way up from Franconia Knott State Park down to Franklin. The people at Lakes that worked on this were David Jeffers and then Erica Anderson helped wrap things up in the report. I brought copies of the report last time. This is kind of a refresh memory, and nudge you to dig it out at some point and look at the map set that we gave you as well. And I'm going to go through the steps of the project so you have a little better understanding of what the maps mean and what you could use them for. And just hop in if you have questions. It's just there. Now we call things co-occurrence mapping. Back when I did GIS, we called it overlay mapping. It's really the same thing. It's identifying some important features, giving them a scoring mechanism that then can score things in aggregate when the features are overlaid together. And I'll show you more about what that means. And Mr. Scarborough could probably jump in and add more details since he's more involved in the committee. This is it visually. The habitat layers that were used were from the Wildlife Action Plan done by New Hampshire Fish and Game. The hydrology layers were things like aquifers, water supply protection lands, floodplains, wetlands, and some generalized data on water quality. In part of the watershed, more detailed information was used, and that's that revised hydrology layer that had more detailed predictive data on water quality based on current land uses. One of the primary reasons, besides the things listed early on, conservation planning and watershed management, and as Mr. Scarborough said, an update coming of the plan, the really biggest thing driving this project was the new in lieu fee program that I don't know if you've talked about it or ran into it in any projects as a planning board. DES got permission, I guess it's now probably 2 years ago, from the Corps of Engineers to accept a payment from time to time when mitigation of a wetland impact doesn't make sense for some reason. Maybe the project is only going to impact an acre of wetland or 2 acres, and mitigation, creating an alternate wetland just doesn't make sense at that small level. So developers in, again, certain cases are going to be allowed to pay into a fund. The money in that fund is going to be restricted to use in the subwatershed where the project was, so that there is at least some logical relationship between the impact and the mitigation fund. This money can be used for conserving wetlands or conserving upland habitat that's related to the wetland and important to that wetland, or restore wetlands that have been negatively impacted by other human activities over time. So the goal of this project was to try out a method for prioritizing lands for the use of the money in this fund. And the LAC and the staff involved in the project worked with federal and state agencies and really took a long time to carefully think about how to score the different attributes based on local and regional priorities, things important to the local river advisory committee. Some of the things that you'd see kind of thrown around in the presentation and the maps in the report, just some basic definitions that when we say watershed, we mean the whole drainage area to the Pemigewasset. When we say a subwatershed, then that's the watershed for one of the tributaries to the Pemigewasset. Now, catchment is even a smaller piece of just a tributary to the tributary, if you can picture that. And this is that visually again. On the left, that's the whole Pemigewasset watershed. And the red shaded area in the middle graphic is one of the subwatersheds that was studied. And then that's not a very great graphic to then pointing to the catchment area. And you see in things like this now references to HUC 8 or HUC 12 a lot, and that's just the hydrologic unit code used by federal and state government so that they have some uniform way to talk about different streams. They start numbering at, the Mississippi Basin level, and then add more digits as they get to a smaller and smaller watershed, so that somebody at EPA and somebody at DS and somebody at the local river advisory committee are always talking the same language. It's not going to be Green's Brook on one map and Reed Brook on another. So that's what you'll see. You'll hear more about HUC numbers as the system gets more starts to be implemented. Again, these are the layers that were overlaid and ranked. The habitat composite is from the Wildlife Action Plan, looking the higher the priority areas in the plan, the higher the score they got. And special resource areas also got a point in addition to that. This slide doesn't have everything in the hydrology composite. I think it also had wetlands and floodplains, public water supply areas and aquifers, and looked at water quality. But the maps also have what they call supplementary layers. They were layers felt to be important to you when you go to use the maps that weren't used in the scoring. And so they showed impaired water bodies on the map, wellhead protection areas, so that you have that linkage when you're trying to use the map to identify an important site that you want to tell DES about, and also lands that are already conserved. On the big map over here, we have this slide in the map too, but I just want to show you so you know what you have. On this map, this is the results of the watershed-wide analysis. And that's what this slide is talking about, saying that the sites, and they're colored lighter to darker based on how many points over here. The darkest would be ones that score a 9, and the areas that are shaded just the kind of a light yellow would be the 1, and then it's graded everything in between, so that you can look at the map and kind of have the high priority areas jump out, basically. That's what that slide is talking about, but the map works a lot better, I think. And then that's this map again, and that's the map with the wellhead protection areas and conserved land and degraded water shown. This is the area that they took a much closer look at, these 4 subwatersheds. And I'll talk about each one of these in a little bit more detail. But I would just want to show you before we go on that in the study areas, because of an additional layer, that revised hydrology composite was used, this had 13 possible points. So on here, again, the darkest would be more toward the 13, and the lighter would be toward the fewer points. And again, it makes it visually pretty easy to have the high priority areas jump out at you. I think they did a great job on these maps. It's not easy. I did GIS for a long time, and it's really not easy to combine as much data as they did on this map set and have it really user-friendly. I think they did a great job. The revised hydrology layer that's on this study area map was based on Fish and Wildlife. It's called Sparrow Data, and I've forgotten what the acronym means, but it's a predictive model looking at water quality based on not water quality data, but on land use that's in the smaller piece of the subwatershed. So that enabled a closer look at these subwatersheds. Again, that's the map that I held up, and that's it with conserved land, and all these maps are in the report as well. And if they're a little bit smaller, 8.5 by 11, but if you'd like 11 by 17s of them, I have the CD and I can print those out. Anybody should just let me know. Those read really well. So the 4 subwatersheds that were studied in more detail, this was the first, and it's the BB River is primarily in Campton, a little bit over into Sandwich and down into Holderness. Of the 4 subwatersheds that were studied in detail, this had the most high quality areas, and that made sense from an intuitive perspective. It had the most conserved land. You see a big chunk of White Mountain National Forest up toward the upper right-hand corner of that subwatershed, northeast. And again, these maps are all in the report. What was called the Campton Tributary subwatershed in the project is in Campton and then over extends into Rumney. This had mostly moderate to high quality areas. Again, quite a bit of White Mountain National Forest, this time in the northwest corner of that subwatershed. When we get down to Plymouth, and the Plymouth Ashland tributaries, as you can see, orient yourself looking at I-93 going down through the middle of the map. That subwatershed goes over into Holderness and Ashland. And some of the areas that jumped out, and you can't really tell from the slide, you really need to be looking at the paper maps, but some of the areas that jumped out as higher than some others, not high, they didn't score in the 9 or 13, but higher than some others in this subwatershed, were in the Glove Hollow Brook catchment, along the Plymouth Dorset itself. And I'm not sure why this was called an unnamed brook in the project. I think it's Reed Brook, comes off the side of the mountain in the southwest corner of town. Again, you know, for a couple of those, it's the headwaters have quite a bit of conserved land, so that makes sense. That's really the map in the report that you're going to want to look at when you want to influence DES on where those funds should be spent. That, you know, you'll want to look for willing landowners in those areas, maybe adjacent to conserved land, where a little bit of money can make a bigger difference. Down into the Bristol, New Hampton tributaries, I think there's actually maybe more Bridgewater in there than Bristol. There's a lot of development pressure when you get down there, very little conservation land, a little bit of the moderate quality area, but primarily low to moderate. Again, some along the Plymouth Dorset River itself, which is good news to the local advisory committee, I'm sure. Looking at some of the supplementary layers and what they're telling us in the broader watershed, 40% of the land is conserved, primarily because the watershed does extend up into the White Mountain National Forest. In the study area, only 14% of the land is conserved. So it follows then of why we're seeing a lot more high quality waters in some other areas of the watershed where there's just not a lot of human activity, so there hasn't been so much sedimentation and erosion and runoff from parking areas and roofs. Again, this is a tool for you to use to try to influence how the money that's paid into the fund is spent in your town. And one of the only communities in the state that has this step ahead on that kind of planning, because when you go to make that recommendation, it won't just be because you like it or you want to or it's popular with the townspeople. You have this scientific analysis that those agencies who would be making the decision are involved in. So, you know, some things that you might want to think about are some of the higher co-occurrence areas, which were in the moderate range in Plymouth. Looking for connectivity you can make between those and land that's already conserved. Not sure that the third one would make sense in Plymouth. In some areas where there's just really high quality water, really important habitat areas to sensitive species, then someone might want to use the fund to proactively prevent something from development. Any questions on that? Yeah,
I have two. What's the parameters to determine it's a catchment or a brook? Was there flow rate, gallons per minute? How big?
No, it's moving its way down the stream, basically. So, you know, starting with Mississippi or the Connecticut,
Well, I'm thinking of Plymouth
So-
area itself. I can think of 3 tributaries, brooks. I own one of them. I have the watershed probably for another one. And, but I want to know at what level. And the other, to correspond with that question is, we just did an update on our wetlands inventory for the town. And was any of that used or researched as far as the technical referencing for this plan, so that when the planning board gets a request for proposal for development and they are evaluating a proposal based on our inventory, which is downstairs of the wetlands, and then we have this planning resource, are we going to have a conflict of technical issues?
My guess is it wasn't used, because one goal of this project was to use data sources that were available across the watershed so that there's uniformity in the system. If they were to have used local mapping versus the NWI, I think they used the NWI, then the numbers mean the same thing from town to town. So if you have something like that, you definitely want to use that as well.
I see the problem that I see, because I spent a lot of time at DES and a lot of time with the boards, and the problem is a lot of this is the best kept secret going, and it's in a format that the citizens, the people who own the land, have no idea of what they've got, don't know how to do anything with it, don't have any means, and they're not technically qualified to talk this talk, and get frustrated. And then what happens is people try to do stuff that was, they get to the planning board and through our wetlands inventory technology and then this resource corridor technology, this piece of work gets to be a frustration, and we need to turn this around so the citizens, the people who own the land, can appreciate this and say, okay, what can I do on my land to recognize this or make it better or not make it worse. And so I'm really concerned about, this is a nice piece, which would like to get a big map, because I'm into the fine details, but I would also hope that it wouldn't provide conflicts of having one council with one resource from your end of it in another piece of inventory that we have on record, which has supposedly been reviewed by DES and approved or accepted at state level. When you do wetlands inventory, that somebody's got to say, yep, this is good. And so that the people have a meaningful document that we can actually use. Otherwise, these studies are great. They just go right on a shelf someplace and get a lot of dust.
I'd be glad to help the town do a press release if that would be helpful. And that would point people to come have a look at the map.
Yeah, I think that would help get some of this out, because we've been through a lot of charades, charrettes over the last 20 years. And
it's one of the biggest frustrations in planning, really, is with such limited budgets, how to educate the public on some of these issues. So
I think we should come back to this point. Are there any other questions?
I have one. If there was let's just say hypothetically, a junkyard that was located next to the river that no longer exists, could that fund that DES has set up be used to clean up the junkyard, the abandoned junkyard that's polluting the river?
I would think so. And have you contacted our office about brownfield money?
Yeah, but they said that it's contacted them. They did an assessment. We applied for the brownfield, and they said it wasn't contaminated enough. So,
okay.
But because you know what it is, it's tires, it's solid waste, and DES was looking at soil
This fund,
contamination.
the in lieu fee program fund might be a good alternative then.
I'm sorry, what?
This might be a good, yeah.
Okay, well, that's what I wanted, because when I contacted DES before and asked them about solid waste removal, we have no money. They never told me about this, and I specifically asked them,
And
how do I
that's them being
how can I remove tires?
compartmentalized, yeah, where one person in one office isn't
Yeah.
talking about another.
Well, that's, yeah, but I mean,
Sorry.
you'd think that DES would know, you know.
I think you should ask them.
Okay, so it would be possible. Right, because you're saying that there's a fund set up to clean up, or you could use it to clean up wetland
The
areas.
fund will be being built with people's mitigation money. Since it's just started, probably not as money in it yet.
Oh, there's no money in it yet.
Right. I mean, I don't know how much is in for each subwatershed right now, but that's a question you should definitely ask.
Okay, so it's a brand new program.
Couple years old.
So there might be money.
It might. Yeah, it's worth asking.
Just to understand, because the funds are compartmentalized town to town, so that if they're...
Subwatershed, or they're trying to make sure they spend the money in as small a piece of the subwatershed as the thing happened in, right? If I didn't explain that very well. If nothing was going on in a particular subwatershed that was associated with a fee, but you had a good project in that, and it's close to somewhere else, then probably you could spend it in that. The bottom line is it has to be in the Plymouth, but they're going to try to keep it for projects as close to the impact as possible.
Okay, but not necessarily in the same town then?
Water doesn't know town boundaries, so no.
Well, when you're saying close, do you mean miles or?
Subwatershed-wise, I would think, you know, that maybe a neighboring subwatershed is going to have a better chance than a project very distant from the impact. And the goal is going to be to make it as meaningful as possible toward mitigating the impact. So if it's in the same subwatershed, that's going to be their goal. But I think going into this, they know that that's just not going to be practical. And there'll be some projects in the broader watershed that have a lot of merit. So it is worth asking your question about, you know, maybe ask the question, how much is in the fund for the Plymouth as a whole?
Because this is, you know, it's not even a tributary. I mean, we're talking about the Femi.
Right. So
we're talking about tires falling in the Femi.
Yeah.
So. Okay.
Is this break or is this the end?
I just want to take a couple more minutes. Things coming up. As Mr. Scarborough mentioned earlier, the River Corridor Management Plan is going to be updated over the next, probably going to be a 2-year project. And North Country Council and Lakes Region have some funding to help do that, and primarily the focus for my part is going to be getting input from my member towns on what's been implemented and not in the previous plan. This is the previous plan for folks that have forgotten since it came out. And if they weren't implemented, why? Because obviously that would make a more informed next version of the plan. I brought to hand out, and I'll hand it out when everybody's back in one place at the table, but just the recommendations pages and the index so that you have a feel for what was in the plan. It would be great if you had 10 minutes at a future meeting to kind of walk through the list of recommendations. It's only a few pages, and talk about them as a board, what's been implemented and what not. And I'd be glad to either come to that meeting, or Miriam could relay the outcome to me, and then we would make sure that gets considered in the update to the plan. When they're at the point where there's a draft plan with new recommendations, I'll be back to get your input on that as a board. And the last thing I just wanted to mention, and this is something that Miriam and I have talked about, we have some funding to help communities who are interested in updating or amending or adding any water resource related amendments. in your zoning, subdivision regulations, or site plan. I always make sure to bring the innovative planning handbook to meetings. I gave the board a couple copies, and Miriam has a copy. There are water resource elements to the book, a lot of background and models. Don't feel like to get the free help, you need to be adopting a model. You could just be updating something you have or using one small piece of one. The timeline's kind of short. We only got the go-ahead mid-July, so obviously you'd want to be talking soon about anything that you're aiming for next year's town meeting, and let me know that you'd like some of that free help, because there are probably 2 or 3 towns, and I have right now Plymouth at the top of the list because Miriam had me pencil you in case there was something that you could use some help with. So that's it. So thanks for taking the time on your busy agenda.
Thank you. Were there any last questions?
Was there any thought about the flooding that happens along the Femi, especially in the winter when you have the ice that creates the dams and the water really backs up because of the bottleneck that you probably found in Plymouth?
I'm not sure what you mean. Was there any thought?
The flooding that happens.
I mean, that issue's flooding is certainly addressed in the corridor management plan.
I think he's talking about maybe a mitigation plan.
Is there a way to, I mean,
Something to address it.
back in the day, they used to solve it with a stick of dynamite and clearing the ice so the water would recede.
Yeah, you have a hazard mitigation plan, right? Was it addressed in your town's hazard mitigation plan?
I mean, if it floods, we have a plan, but I think what he's
Well, that
talking
would
about
be
is
an
more
emergency
preventative.
operation plan. The
Yeah.
hazard mitigation plan does look at. Well, I'll follow up with our hazard mitigation plan.
Actually, to tell you the truth, I mean, we got a call from North Country Council saying that they would help us update our hazard mitigation plan because it's going to expire, and we've been waiting.
Okay.
So we haven't gotten a call back, and we desperately need it because it's going to expire like in a couple months.
Yep.
So the town administrator's been waiting by the phone. He's like, wait, they said they would come do it. They said they would call me, and they never called me back.
Yeah.
So that's what he told me.
We had some turnover in that position, and June Garno, who is working on those, is working fast and furious to catch up with the towns that are in that position, with up to 2 meetings with communities a day. Hold on the road quite a bit, but I'll ever give you a call.
Yeah, or the town administrator, because that's where she started out.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
You wanted us all to be staying back in our seats to hand something else out, didn't you?
Sure. I'll do that when you're back to
Innovative.
Yes, I did.
Anything with a title like
the town has a couple copies. I think I have one. It's not.
From last week, it's got to be in there.
You could give it back to Marion for review sometime.
Grant's interested too. I almost grabbed that.
Sure. Oh, that's right. You have the whole thing. Do you have exit numbers?
Yes, 2. That'd be a terrific idea. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, should we move along to the second item under new business, which would be the town planner has something to discuss with us about the Femi River Walk proposal, an introduction to the concept and permission to advertise for a public hearing.
Right. Okay. So as you're aware, the Transportation Enhancement Grant has been reactivated. It hasn't been in existence since 2004. But what this is there's a grant from the state government that will allow us to put in, a bike path or any kind of, they have a list of approved projects. So that grant is due September 15th. And they needed a letter of intent. And we got together with just the technical staff here in town, so the highway manager, the town engineer, Frank Miller, who's representing the citizens, and he's got the history of, going to all the meetings that we've all the towns. And we looked at all the other plans that we've had for different walkways. And what we looked at was which area is most critical in need of sidewalk. And that was this area right here. So this is the courthouse here. And then the sidewalk just plain ends. This is where the public boat launch is and the amphitheater. So we're talking about continuing the sidewalk here. And then this road right here is Anderson's Bakery. So you have Main Street, and then you turn over here to Anderson's Bakery, and there's no kind of sidewalk. So you walk down there, and then you go into Rand's hardware store where the parking lot is. But if you want to walk, it's sort of difficult because there's a lot of busyness happening here. So we're talking about adding a sidewalk here, and then also on the other side of the street of Main Street, there's a sidewalk here, but then all of a sudden it gets really narrow. So we're talking about widening that. And then a little bit after this was submitted, we got an email from John Gross, who's in our audience here, having this overall concept of Femi River Walk. And this would be a 10-mile circuit. And it fit in perfectly with what our plan was for the phase one. So I'm looking at incorporating this, and since we have the opportunity for the Transportation Enhancement Fund for this first phase, to see if I could get community support, planning board approval to pursue that, and at the same time advertise for a public hearing for our next planning board meeting, the August 20th. And so we can get the public input on how they would feel about going ahead with phase one. And then, as I said, with the goal of being that one day we would be able to look at this whole thing as a whole. So what it is as a whole is that you would have this recreational multi-use trail. So it could be for walking and biking. And the way we're showing it here is just using the existing right-of-way along Highway 3. Going down here, then there's a bridge that crosses over the river, and now you're in Ashland. And using this North Ashland Road, and then until you hit 175 North Holderness Road. Follow this existing right-of-way, cross over to where our new bridge is that already has sidewalk on it. So that, that's already done. And then coming back around. And we also added here possible extensions that maybe there'd be some private interest in helping support a bike trail like this. So we noticed that there's the Common Man Inn, and I haven't talked to Alex Ray yet, okay, but this was just an idea that we thought that maybe there'd be interest over here to connect to the trail here, and then also the Common Man's over here, and then the Italian farmhouse. So maybe there'd be some private, so we do a private-public partnership, so that no way would the taxpayers have to encumber any kind of expense. We'll see if we can come up with a partnership. The other thing I did was contact Spear Memorial Hospital to see if they would be interested in such a, the Femi River Walk, which is what we were thinking of calling it, the Plymouth Femi River Walk. And they expressed interest too, because that helps with their wellness program, that they really want to encourage people to walk. I contacted Plymouth State University, and I talked to the basketball coach over there, and he said that this is a good area because it's very flat. So he thought that also, I haven't talked to Sarah Jane yet, but there also would be interest in having a wellness program, or there's already started a wellness program for the students. So I just wanted to get your all's feedback on this proposal, and Don, who's came up with it, is over here for questions too, and then also to get permission to have a public hearing at the next meeting, so we can get public input on it.
And it wouldn't cost the town any money? It would just be an asset?
Well, right. At this point, all we're talking about is just a plan and seeing if there's support for even a plan. And, and I'm sorry, and I didn't explain the red. The red was, the idea of calling it the Femi River Walk is that we can get closer to the river, because that's really the main asset, to have people be able to walk along the river. So if we can go by the railroad, where there's a railroad right-of-way, not on the railroad, but next to it, that would be something to look at. Typically, what I've heard is the railroad right-of-way is pretty narrow. I was imagining it to be wider, but I've heard it's not. But we could also, if we have it marked down here as a path, that in the event that the railroad ever, God forbid, went under, there's always Rails to Trails grant money, where if this railroad track is ever abandoned, then we at least would have the plan to say, okay, now is an opportunity that we can apply for the Rails to Trails money and turn it into a walkway here. But the question about money, what we're looking at right now is just this first phase here, which is extending this sidewalk along Green Street, making some improvements here. I gave you copies of them. There's a retaining wall over here on the other side of Anderson's Bakery, on the other side of that road. So moving that retaining wall, and then this connects it up to the senior center. This is the first phase that we're looking at, and the grant is 80-20. So the federal government would provide us with 80% of the cost, which the federal government's giving the money to New Hampshire DOT, and the town would look at 20% of the cost. Now that would be, we've already got that money in highways budget, so it's not an added expense, it's already in highways budget for this year. The grant cycle is, turn in the grant September 15th, they would let us know if we got it February, and if the money doesn't roll over, then we would present it to town meeting for that. But as I said, we didn't exceed what our existing budget is in highway.
Mr. Ahern?
I'm familiar a little bit with that proposed alternate part along the tracks.
Yeah.
You can't see the river from there. You'd have a better chance of seeing it from the road than you can from way down there.
Yeah, all of this will, we'll work on details as we get to those stages. We just wanted to put out different alternatives so that the goal is to be able to see the river.
Yeah, you can't see it from there.
Yeah, okay.
Now, also, the Rails to Trails, I thought that was found unconstitutional.
Really? I never heard that.
There was a number of issues in Vermont with that, where they tried to do that. And along the railroad track, in that area, the property owners all have agreements that when it stops becoming a railroad, that it reverts back to the property owners. So that's why they continue as a railroad. That's what the purpose was purchased for, not for walking or anything else.
Okay. All right. Well, I wasn't aware of that. So, what I am aware of is that there's just a number of communities that are looking at doing walks, like river walks. I know Franklin's doing one, and then did you say it was Lincoln?
Lincoln, yes.
Lincoln has one.
So what you're looking for is sort of the approval to do sort of a two-stage thing. One, apply for a grant that will improve the safety of sort of downtown with those sidewalks, and then also to do the take the sort of exploratory approach that you need to find out, is it feasible to have a plan, an idea for a larger loop? Is it sort of those two things, the sidewalks, and there's the exploration of a loop?
Actually,
today it's just to introduce it because I didn't want to do a public hearing without you all approving it, and then all of a sudden it's a surprise, and it's a public. So making you aware of it and seeing if you want me to go ahead with advertising a public hearing for the next meeting. And then the other part that I want to talk about was the 2 projects. Yes, I do need support or opinions on applying for this first part. And then there is the second. So maybe there's 4 issues. And then the 4th one is this is a general concept. The area in red, I mean, it was just, an alternative. If it's unconstitutional, cross that out. I mean, the original proposal is just to use the existing right-of-way. But, the discussion also, though, is with the existing right-of-way, you're talking about having people and walkers and bikers along this part of Daniel Webster Highway, and the sight distance is bad. And I know a lot of people said they can't see them, so we'd like to, the idea was to get them off the road, but... Mike?
Have anybody voiced any concerns about young children on this walking path, especially towards the bottom half on the Plymouth side?
I'm sorry, do you mean?
There's a special home in that area that you probably wouldn't want to be parading young children through, that you'd want to get them away from that area, not encourage them to walk there.
So we tell you, yes, you should bring this forward for a public hearing. That means in the next 2 weeks you'll flesh out something more, to make something more concrete, or are you still looking just for the approval to even take the time to make a proposal to the state?
What the state wants is community support. So we could view it as 2 separate projects. We could look at community support for Project A, and then, community support for Project B, or Project B can just be, concept right now. I mean, either way, the most immediate is we need to get community input on this part here. So in terms of fleshing out, it's only at a concept stage right now with this whole.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Kelly.
Can there be a more complete explanation as to what this path is for? As I understand it, that somewhere where I read this, is skateboarders could be on this too. I believe it's in part of the alpha part of this. So I'd like to be very clear that it's a walking bicycle path and not a multi-purpose path that anything and everything. I have a personal experience of a big white horse in the middle of the rail trail and on the Cape, and I'm telling you, they can block that walkway a lot, and you have to do a lot of thinking if you're coming down over a hill and you see a big white horse right crossways that path. I know. Okay. So, and skateboarders, they can let those boards go, and because I think it said something about wheelchairs and skateboards and all kinds of things like that. So I'm just concerned that for the safety's sake, if nothing more, of being pretty clear as to what this path is going to be used for.
Right. So that's definitely something we would discuss at the public hearing and get that fleshed out, so that would help me with my application on September 15th. I mean, if we want to make a decision, no skateboards, then that's fine. We can put whatever kind of restrictions we want. The way the grant is funded is they usually have to separate out motorized versus non-motorized. So, car and not cars. But we can easily separate it out further and say, skateboards aren't appropriate. So there's not any kind of
now
problem
that
with
one plan that you've got, the first plan that you've got, can you explain that to me a little bit more? Because does that incorporate any part of the snowmobile trail?
No.
The snowmobile trail basically goes along the railroad tracks, correct?
Right, and all the way up through.
And where this is, the phase one is, there's the courthouse, and then you'll see the sidewalk just plain stops. So there's no sidewalk here in front of the public boat launch and the amphitheater. So this is going along Green Street. And
Doesn't
you
that
see-
cross the railroad?
Yes.
Does that cross the railroad?
Well,
Straight over.
it's going to stop right here where there's that railroad crossing. So we're just talking about extending the sidewalk to the senior center, and then where there's the railroad crossing. It might be easier to see it on here.
I think the question may be, if you're walking on this path,
And
do
then
you...
it ends, and then you have the sidewalk go up here. Is that?
No, that's okay, but somewhere along the way, I'd like to get that, clearly designated as to where that is.
Can I add something here? I think you got some confusion. First of all, the statewide multi-use trail has already been designed into the new bridge. That comes along down alongside the boat ramp, and it connects in just by the riverside where the Rotary Club fixed the amphitheater. The snowmobile club of Romney, Plymouth, Hampton, or whatever, paid for and got permission by DES in the town to extend that trail, the multi-use trail, down past and just ends at the highway department. Okay? Now from the highway department, so it's down about here because it's highway departments in this area here. From this point on, the highway department and down to the sewer place is where the only place to cross the railroad tracks to continue this trail. And by the way, this trail has been completed up to Ashland. So this is a state project, and part of Route 3's in the 10-year plan of reconstructing Route 3 to Bridgewater from Plymouth is once they take up the concrete and they do the under drainage and all that, they want to make a 5 or 6 foot wide path to continue to connect Ashland, Bridgewater, Plymouth, Hampton. So we've been doing it in stages for the last 20 years. This part of what you heard on the skateboarder part, first there was 2 initiatives. One was a temporary initiative to put something together in that flat area right by this senior center parking area. Part of our Green Street plan and our master plan and our cultural arts plans talks about a long-term goal of a riverfront park, of which this area that is south of the amphitheater system is a green area that's in the floodway. It would be upgraded and cleaned out in a similar fashion as the amphitheater, and it would be a multi-generational, multi-use park area that could be used by anybody, including skateboarders. But the trail itself is not. The statewide multi-use trail, I don't know what their list of types of so-called vehicles that can be used on it. So that's 2 events. We have our own Plymouth riverfront projects here that we have in the Green Street plan, and then it's trying to connect what the state has funded and done for the multi-use trail, which will be part of the Route 3 upgrade. And of course, the critical part is right here at Parker Street, which is scheduled to be closed in the future.
Thank you. So
the roundabout down by Parker Street is out the window right now?
No, it's
So you
just,
said it was going to be closed.
no, that the coming Parker Street, in order for the state to redo that Route 3, Parker Street connection has to be rethought of by the town. Ultimately closed off because there's no hope of fixing that intersection to be a safe road.
Okay, now, on that revitalization of the Route 3, as I understand it, the state doesn't have any money for the next 10 years.
That's why it's a 10-year /15/20. But the line item is in there.
Right, but they don't
It's in
have
the
money.
plan.
But they don't have any money.
Well, we need to get ourselves, our plan on this project, because we need to start planning, because if they do get the money, they're going to show up like they did on this paving job, and we're not going to have ourselves ready to go with the projects that we've had in our master plan and our Green Street Committee list of things we want to happen.
So to move us forward in this meeting, so what we're looking at is, and to clarify, is we're not talking about touching any snowmobile paths or routes, because those already exist now and have been designed recently in a very sane way. And we're floating out the various uses that could be used besides walking, and it sounds like skateboarding isn't one. And there's some discussion as to whether, in a large-scale plan, a large-term plan, there might be some public input that could help detail what a route might be. But what we're really looking forward to here is seeing if we want to give the town planner permission to move forward in sort of presenting two items. One, the improvements of sidewalk and pedestrian traffic in our downtown area from the courthouse and along Green Street and South Main Street. And do we also want to see if we can if the town planner can come up with a conceptual plan of how that might fit into a larger walking network.
Correct.
And this is all to take advantage of state money and not spend ours.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, is there any plans of not having it cost the town of Plymouth anything? We seem to have a great habit of getting a project, and once the project is done, then the state, and then the town takes over, and we have to maintain it and everything. And I understand there's stimulus money here to do all this, but how about 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line, is the town of Plymouth going to incur a lot of money, both for the security,
Right.
police, the night and day, and also for the maintenance of it?
Right.
You know.
Right, and that's extremely, extremely valid. Okay, let me just split out the two plans again though. This first one is it's just from the courthouse to the senior center, so just extending that amount of the driveway. Okay, so let's just call that one, Plan 1, and then going up by Anderson's Bakery, so just that little section of the road, and then going from, okay, you guys probably know what the corner, Bad Dogs, right? And then going down a little bit. So we're just talking about minimal. That I did talk to the highway director, and he said he'll do the maintenance. That's not a big deal for him.
But it still costs the town of Plymouth, because he needs to have that extra plowing, he needs that extra,
he
all
has
that
to do
other
the extra
stuff.
plowing, and he said as long as the sidewalk is 6 feet wide, he can do it. So it's just, he would be going a little bit farther. He goes here, and then he'd be carrying it a little bit farther here and here. I did talk to him, that's what he told me, it would not be a problem. However, your question about maintenance in terms of the whole thing, if we go for this, that's why I'm thinking we'll do it in sections. But that's something that we have to talk about. And when I talked to the highway manager, he's not willing to take that on. So that's why I'm looking at maybe, go before the Rotary Club and see if they want to adopt a section, or, but let's split it out. I mean, we've got phase 1 and then we've got the overall thing. And I'm not looking to do all of this right now. I'm just looking at phase 1. But that's a really valid point, and we do need to look at maintenance for that. I mean, there's no way that I can say to our highway manager, okay, guess what? Now you've got 10 miles, extra. But phase 1, I did get approved by him. He went out with us and looked at it. So I'm sorry, that was the other person that was out with us too.
Mr. Ahern?
One other point, where the cars park alongside Anderson's Bakery, looks like it's paved, it is, and then there's a town sign that says stop, whatever. That's on private property. That is owned by the bakery.
Yeah,
I don't know if people know that.
We looked at that. Now, where the stop sign is, that is on town right-of-way.
Okay.
And we looked at that. Where Anderson's Bakery is in the awnings is their property. So where their car is, actually, they're parking on town right-of-way.
They own 6 feet from the side of the building over.
I'm sorry, how many feet?
6 feet.
Yeah. So
obviously,
I think
plan
some of
would...
the car, it's in the right-of-way.
A little bit.
If you made a plan to the state, you would have, you'd go through the due diligence of making sure that everybody's property rights were respected, right?
Correct. I mean, that is something that we're aware of.
Okay.
And so we know that's an issue. And also we met with Mr. Rand about, putting that sidewalk by there too. I mean, it would be on the town right-of-way. But there is a part where it's not exactly town right-of-way. It's like this part over here, it's sort of, we'd be crossing over on Mr. Rand's property and crossing over on the senior center's property. So yeah, we have to work out those issues. So that's going to be a question, and then we have to work out with the Anderson's Bakery. So there's probably going to be a memorandum of understanding.
So do we want to charge the town planner to schedule a public hearing on this idea and to come before us in 2 weeks with a more solid proposal of what she expects?
I think we'd better do a lot more research before we start asking the public if it's all right to do a lot of this stuff, because so far there's not an awful lot of answers for who owns what property and
Well, my understanding is that we're under the pressure of a small and short window of opportunity to get the state's money, to get this incentive money.
Grants will come and go, and I'd rather see something done right.
Right.
Instead of rush to get.
I agree completely. And what I was saying is, and because we have the short window, what we need to do is we need to file a letter of intent. And what we can do the detail, as I understand this correctly, we can do the details down the line, but we need to move forward. Is that not correct?
Well, sort of. We had a very short window with this grant. The letter of intent actually was filed.
Oh.
Now's the time to have the public hearing and have the public support. What I need tonight is to get a motion in a second if you want me to advertise for public hearing or not. The deadline to do that is, I have to let the paper know by tomorrow, Friday, if I'm going to do the public hearing for August 20th, because it has to be published so many days before. And then, so if the answer's no, don't go forward, it's not ready, then we'll just not go forward with the grant, because that's due September 15th, and I have to have community support, meaning we need the public hearing. So that's an option. Again, with this proposal, I mean, we know who the owners are, so we've got this part fleshed out. This part, we're not even asking for a grant yet. It's just an overall.
No, I'm not talking about. I'm talking about the shop, phase one.
The phase one. Yeah, I mean that's your all's decision.
Well, but wouldn't it be conducive to the process if there was a public hearing and so people could say, hey, that's my property and I don't want this to happen, versus, I mean, that'll have to happen at some point.
I mean, I hope it's, you're not misunderstanding. I mean, I have the property maps. We know who owns what.
Have you got agreements with the property owners?
No, that we have to get.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, we have to get the agreement.
You're sort of putting the horse before the cart because you've got a plan, but you don't know whether you can implement it or not because you don't know what the owners want or anything. I just think that you should be a lot more detailed before you put it to the public, because the public isn't going to understand what you're talking about in the first place, and you're just having it so that they're saying yes to something they don't know whether the answer is yes or no.
Or even worse, people could show up thinking with the sense that the town has a plan that goes over their property and they haven't been even consulted yet. Has anybody not been consulted who would have this, who would have to give right-of-way issues or would lose land?
We met with Steve Rand. So, and I took notes and he just said write it up as a memorandum of understanding. So that we worked out with him.
I haven't contacted the bakery because we're showing that we have that as right-of-way. You see what I'm saying? But no, I haven't contacted them, and I need to contact the senior center also.
Well,
And I've called them, but I haven't gotten a response back.
You're having right-of-way over their property, though. Is that what you're saying?
No, I mean,
Or that,
let's put it this way. Our maps show we have right-of-way. They're parking cars there that might be on our right-of-way, so it could be disputed.
I just think Lowe's took 5 years and we're still not through with that. And now there's something like this is we're going to have to throw together within a week or two.
Mr. Sutcliffe?
Just on the property line discussion, is there anything on South Main Street that's affected at all?
No.
Doug McLean's, I see a widening of the sidewalk to 6 feet and relocation of the curb line as part of this.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what was it? We have that right-of-way.
Oh, okay, that's all square.
Yeah, we have that right-of-way. We have the right-of-way by Anderson's Bakery, but I'm not saying that there's not going to be, you know, that they're going to be happy.
I make a motion that
One thing, the sidewalk from Annie's Bakery down to the railroad track is basically a painted sidewalk. It's not change in material, any curving. It was just a designated walkway, and the only reconstruction is at the end of Steve Rand's equipment parking area, where I talked to him about squaring up the embankment area so that the surface area of the sidewalk designated painted would be flat. It's at an angle, but right now it's at a tilt angle. So we'd like to make that sidewalk area flat. It does two things. Obviously, it's a safer way to have people walk, and two, we're trying to mitigate the drainage from Chase Street and Green Street, which comes down by Annie's Bakery. There's a catch basin down at the end just before you get to the railroad track that is high and dry right now, and all the water from those two streets run down onto Steve Rand's parking lot. Needless to say, this sidewalk upgrade would help get that water into a real catch basin rather than just flooding into the parking lots, and provide a safe corridor, because the south side of Green Street towards Penny Glass has got a tilt and an angle. And obviously, if you stand there a few minutes and watch the senior citizens try and get down that street with their walkers, you know, it's really not the place we want them to go, because if there's a vehicle there, there's just a concrete wall. There's no place for them to go. So obviously, the north side of Green Street, where Annie's Bakery is the most advantageous, safe. It has the best visibility for people and vehicles. And the only sidewalk that's going to be so-called constructed in this project is the across from the courthouse. At the end of the courthouse contract, they literally stopped. That was the end of their contract, and the sidewalk stopped. We want to continue that till you get to the boat or launch pad ramp and put in a pad or apron. Okay, that would be the sidewalk area. Then get across and be all of 12 feet of sidewalk, so-called paved sidewalk, till you get to the parking lot of the amphitheater. Again, that'll be a painted sidewalk, and it's the stuff that the town already owns and we maintain now in our budget. So there's no big, massive maintenance budget of this to the town, because the areas that are going to be designated walkways are already being maintained by the town for snow removal. So the problem with our concepting maps here is we've been using a 1985 with a 2007 tax map, which are not, viable for property ownership. They're only concept maps as far as I'm concerned. Obviously, the issue with Andy's Bakery is we need their surveyed plot plan as to just exactly where the town's property is, so-called, and their property line, so that we don't have this roundabout discussion about what we think.
No, I mean, we have that though, because...
That's the big stick right there.
Okay, well, you know, Steve Rand gave me his maps, he's got it all surveyed out. I'm just saying, you know, some people might not be happy with what really is. But in terms of, you know, the engineering or whatever, this wasn't slopped together. I mean, SEA already made the engineering plan. So this is something that SEA did a number of years ago. I have the engineering plans. I already had our town engineer come out and draw up his, you know, engineering plans, which he was part of SEA at that time, so he drew the original. So this little connection is something that we have, that we wanted to do for a long time. This part here, it's nothing.
And the railroad crossing itself, which is the most expensive technical issue on this whole thing, was an agreement by the state when they built the courthouse that they were going to upgrade that like they did on 175 with a new bridge, rebuild that crossing because of the traffic flow as a result of the courthouse. That was an agreement. It's in the 1995 town report, Green Street project, that the state was going to acknowledge it and they were going to fund it. Obviously, it got to the end and ran short on their monies and it got cut. But this plan here, this new proposal is going back to the state and saying, hey, you know, this is what we need to complete the project list. There was 9 projects on Green Street as part of that Green Street. We've completed 7 of them. It's taken us 20 years to complete 7 of them. This sidewalk connection will have completed that part of Green Street to the senior center. And that will make that whole system finished, the sidewalk, this pedestrian.
So if you come to us in 2 weeks, you can bring these plans that show that for years, you know, this has been thought out. And if there was a public hearing noticed for 2 weeks, would all the abutters to this proposal be notified by mail?
Sure.
Chairman?
Okay, here's the, I'm sorry. Here's the SEA plan. It's called the South Main Street Feasibility Study. It's done in 2006, but I can just pass it around.
And Mr. Cully?
As I understand it now, there won't be any construction on that sidewalk. All it will be is a couple of cans of paint, and they're going to designate the sidewalk with just with a paintbrush and a can. And that gets me back to the grant. How many thousands of dollars are you going to ask for in the grant for two cans of paint?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure about the 2 cans of paint. I mean, we're going to extend this sidewalk just like the same sidewalk that's here, the same material that's by the courthouse. And then the part that's going by Rand's, I mean, we haven't really talked about the material. Maybe asphalt, or it's going to be delineated some way.
Well, isn't that going to interrupt the traffic going behind Rand's?
Yeah, but that's why from Anderson's Bakery down to the railroad track, other than the minor construction of his equipment embankment area to level out that actual sidewalk area, which would be put back in asphaltic material so that it would facilitate the drainage of Green Street, Chase Street, that sidewalk to the railroad track will be designated by paint only. No other medium will go in there because 2 things. It's a maintenance headache, and the 2 people that own and control the property, it would not be in their best interest. And I, as a citizen of the town of Plymouth, will speak against anything else because we are trying to upgrade and use 2009 technology for public safety access on a town that was designed in 1763. It isn't going to work. You have to make a blend and compromise of the safest issue of trying to designate a safe walkway area in an area that isn't wide enough for vehicles and pedestrians by today's standards. We have to make obviously that road, Green Street, would not be approved on our own town ordinance for 10% grade. We have to live with what we have, but try to make what we have work the safest and nicest looking way that we can. And so that area, to put it in a sidewalk, granite curbing and all that, and green space, it's just not going to happen. And so this is the part that's been discussed here for the last 10, 15.
So you're going down, are you going down the side of the railroad track with that sidewalk?
I'm going down perpendicular to the railroad track with a designated painted sidewalk. Then the state and whoever does the crossing across the railroad track, that has to be a certain technical medium, okay? That's the most expensive part. Then you go across Green Street over to the amphitheater. That'll be painted.
Okay.
And then it's parallel to the existing granite curb they put in the amphitheater, because the parking area there is like 25 feet deep and you only need a 20-foot spot, so why make more stuff? You just back the cars up, keep your 5 feet, go right in front of that whole amphitheater area until you get to where the stones are for the boat launch. There's probably 12 foot of so-called concrete sidewalk we would construct, put the paved boat launch apron in, get you across to the last piece of that concrete sidewalk that was part of the courthouse project. And that's the total sum of the concept for this, as I saw it and walked it and talked it.
It would be very useful to see that, you know, on this size piece of paper,
Yeah,
if we have this kind of a meeting in 2 weeks. Yes, Ms. Bishop.
Yeah, I have a question. Are you guys still proposing to put plants or trees along that sidewalk by Rand's parking lot?
Trees on, gosh, you guys should have all gotten a copy of the 8.5 by.
It shows it, but I don't know.
That will not happen.
It's not going to happen?
No.
Well, that's right.
Plants and trees by Steve Rand's,
Along the walkway?
where he has his tractor trailers parked so he can back in and load.
Yeah, I was going to ask somebody to walk the other end of this project as well. It looks like there's more going on this map further up. Can we continue to do the same thing in the other direction?
Locate curb line up here.
I'm looking at the
Which direction is up for you?
I'm looking at the bump out in front of Anderson's and then a moving of a retaining wall in front of what looks like Pemi glass.
Curious that when people are.
Sounds more substantial than painting a sidewalk.
Right.
But we're not going to address that yet.
Oh, I know, I see it there, but I'm just wondering if that's that.
Yeah, that
So
was...
it's going to
looks
be some
big.
kind of rollover curb, or maybe we're
I don't know.
talking about adding curbing.
right out into the road.
Two
Town planner?
spots
Yeah.
Town planner?
in the middle of Main.
So there's a question about, does this plan propose relocating the retaining wall that's
Yes.
supporting Pemi glass right now?
Yeah, it says relocate retaining walls.
So that would be pushed back in towards Pemi glass to widen that area?
Yes.
And then I'm guessing 20-foot bump out in front of Anderson's into Main Street?
Install bump out. Yeah, I don't know the dimension, but yeah.
Looks like a full parking spot length there to me.
Well, actually, we went over there and just looked at it again. What's there right now is stripes on it, and there are parking here. So when you look at what was just re-asphalted, it doesn't interfere with that. So when you're on Main Street, you're traveling on the asphalt and you're going straight, and this defines that area a little bit so that it would be safer for the pedestrians.
That would, so that's again painted then, that's not a raised surface or...
Well, no, we were talking about raising it, just because it's a safety concern. Right now it's painted. Right now it's painted stripes. We're talking about raising that, and then we were talking about putting curbing in, and then, putting landscaping in.
But it does not make Main Street any narrower than it is now, in terms of where you're supposed to drive.
It's all existing right-of-way.
Mr. Chairman, on that, where you're going to push that retaining wall back, doesn't that include Christian Science too? There used to be...
They're not
It's
there
now
anymore.
Main Street, Plymouth Inc. office.
Okay, isn't that going to...
Christian Science, they
Isn't that
moved
going-
across.
Isn't that going to cut back of that?
Yes.
So you've got another party that you're talking with.
Well, this is all in town right of way, but yeah, I mean, if there's.
So the town owns that retaining wall now, and if it moved it closer to Pemmy Glass, it would still stay in the town's town's purview. Okay. Well, what's the feeling of the board?
I think there should be more research done and few more answers before they do that.
Ms. Bishop?
I was just going to say, I think that's what we're going to get more answers in the next public meeting. We'll have all those answers, hopefully.
But you're going to have those answers for people to ask when they're asking those questions, you know. And if we could stand there like bumpkins during the public meeting and not have any more answers than we have right now, I think it would.
But I think the town planner just gave us a key answer, which was that this proposal is for the town to work within all of its property and right-of-ways that it now possesses.
Then why are you concerned about Anderson Bakery?
I'm not concerned. I mean, I did say that we would make sure that the town didn't encroach on anybody's property line. Mr. Ahern mentioned something about 6 feet from the buildings, and that's the only time I think I mentioned Anderson's.
Well, I thought there was something about the senior citizen and also Anderson, that there was a question as far as...
But the town planner's most recent statement was that this proposal is completely and entirely within the confines of what the town already has rights to and owns.
Correct. Except for this bottom part.
Except for which is the, sorry, I couldn't see your sheet, so I don't know what you said.
Okay. Except this bottom part, what Steve Rand showed us is that it's easement.
Except for the part that you did consult with the property owner.
Yeah, I consulted with Steve Rand. I put a call into the senior center. I still need to talk with them, but I don't see a reason why they wouldn't want a sidewalk here to serve their people. But we'll get that all formalized. I mean, it's just a matter of, when you look at it, we're all driving on this, but when you look at the property records, what we're driving on is actually owned by the senior center part, and part it's owned by Rand, that very last part of whatever we even call this road. I mean, Highland Street Extension, or some people call it Green Street.
Green Street comes down parallel to the tracks, make a right hand, goes up to Andy's Bakery.
Okay, but when I talked to Steve Rand, he said it's not called Green Street. So
as long as we all know what road we're talking about, it goes across the railroad track and down to the senior
center. One in front of the senior center that goes down to the water and sewer is called South Street.
Okay.
So can we move forward as a board?
Well, right now they just want permission in order to have a hearing here, correct? That's what we would need to make some sort of proposal.
Right.
At the end of this hearing, would we then vote on whether we want to put this forward, or do they need our okay, the planning boards? How is that going to work?
I would presume.
Yes. I would say if you decide that our advertising will have the public hearing, then at the end of the public hearing, then yes, it would be appropriate for the planning board to say, we support this project, or no, don't go forward.
Now, a year or 2 years ago, Mike Heath stood in front of us and said the two most dangerous intersections in Plymouth were Parker Street and Cummings Hill Road. This money couldn't have been used for something like that. It was more for a civic-minded...
Right. Transportation enhancement money is where they have like different categories, but it's basically for bike routes or multi-use recreational trails, or for something historic. Like, we use transportation enhancement money to redo the depot for the senior center.
So it needs to be
foot traffic. They don't do it for road improvement. It would have been great if they could do it for road improvement.
Okay.
But that's part of the reason why we have to include the sidewalk along here. We can't just fix the drainage.
Would bicycles be riding on this enhanced area? Because sometimes they ride 4 abreast, and it can get... I wouldn't be worried about the skateboarders. I'd be worried more about the bicyclists. Would they be riding on this surface?
The state law states that there can only be one single rider. They might have 4 riders, like you might go 80 miles an hour down the road, but it's strictly illegal,
Okay.
and if the security forces of Plymouth wanted to, they could haul them off the road and fine them.
Wow.
Yeah, it's what's permitted and what actually happens. I mean, we
Okay.
don't allow skateboarding downtown either, but it happens, you know. So, but the way the grant's structured, we couldn't prevent bicycles from using it, but they should do it in a legal manner.
And could you just make it clear again what the consequence would be of not having a public hearing at our next meeting?
Okay, if we don't have the public hearing, then I'm just going to interpret it as don't go forward with the grant. Because the grant's due September 15th, so
And you need to have the community's support.
I need community support before.
And the
we go forward.
grant is only for what?
The grant is to extend the sidewalk here, to go up here on Green Street if we want to.
The actual construction of it.
The construction.
And the improvement of the drainage on private property and...
I mean, it's this plan right here.
Do you have a ballpark of how much money the state would give us?
Yes. Um,
265?
265,000.
265,000.
And then 80% comes from the state and 20% comes from the town, but it's already in Highway's budget, Highway Department's budget.
Has that been, it's in the budget and been voted on?
I'm sorry?
It's in the budget and it's been voted on.
It's in the existing budget that's been voted on.
So is there a motion for us to move forward with having a public hearing on this in 2 weeks, or to not do this and move to the next item on our agenda?
I wouldn't mind making a motion that we could have a public hearing, but with the condition that the town may have money somewhere in the budget, but that the 20% would come from private funding, not town budget. I would like to make that motion.
Second.
So the motion is that we direct the town planner to have a public hearing at our next meeting, and to notify that, and to, at that meeting, solicit the idea that somebody in the audience might want to donate their money as opposed to have the town pay for it.
The audience tonight? Frank, are you ready to ante up?
I don't have $52,000 on me, thank you very much.
Let me rephrase that, and to propose that the town would be willing to accept private donations for this.
And that no town funds would go towards this at all.
Well, and that's what I'm trying to clarify here. Are you making a motion that we move forward only on the condition that when we have the public hearing, that it's on the condition that the town doesn't spend the money it already has budgeted for it?
Right.
Correct.
Wait a minute. All right. Is it possible to do this 2 motions? Can we have one for the public hearing, and can I just clarify something about the
yeah.
grant? Let me just clarify something about the grant. I understand what you're suggesting, but I don't want to be dishonest with the way the grant is structured. It's a reimbursement grant. So that means that the town has to pay the money for it, and then they submit their receipts to DOT, and then DOT reimburses, and they'll reimburse up to 80%.
Is this going to end up like the parking lot? Or the town pays for it all? We've got caught into that once before, you know. All of a sudden, everything flies away and the town pays $290,000 for a parking lot that's not
Well,
being used.
And we certainly don't want to get snookered by this. But in terms of governmental procedure, if you had the town planning board's support for this grant and it went forward, you would deal with the select board, wouldn't you? And it would actually be their decision to sign off on these things?
Correct.
So I think, Mr. Kelly, that's an excellent question for the select board to consider. Mr. Aaron?
I'd also be concerned about the town's just spending $52,000 for this. What do we actually get for it?
Yeah.
And how is that stimulating the economy, years down the road? What is it actually doing for us? $52,000 is still a lot of money, and I think the town could find other uses for that. We're also making improvements to private property for this. It would help with the drainage on. But maybe it's this board's responsibility to pick projects that are winners and pick projects that probably shouldn't even be wasting the time.
Well, is that a discussion that maybe should be had at the next meeting when we see what kind of benefits will come out of it from the public's perception? If people like walking to the senior center or walking along the railroad tracks to get to the courthouse or
Mr. Chairman,
whatever?
they've walked down that hill for years and years and years, and ever since I was a kid here. And now I'm a senior citizen, and I bet you I could walk down that hill without falling on my face. So, maybe it would improve it, but there again, there's no great safety. Nobody's ever been hit there. Nobody's ever been killed there. Nobody's ever had, I don't believe, any bad accident about falling down, doing anything like that any more than they would any other place on the sidewalks and so forth. So, it just, I'll go along with Mike. I don't know who is benefiting most, the town or private people.
Well, I concur with you, and I think that both you and Mr. Ahern have made excellent points about, wisely spending our money. But I think also in our democracy that we shouldn't, as our individuals, say we don't want to have a public hearing because we don't want to hear what the public wants and we're going to make a decision. I would like to have a public hearing personally. I'm just speaking personally now as a member of the board, to know, to get some direction from the public. And if the overwhelming message is, spend that $52,000 somewhere else because we've been walking for a long time, I think that'd be a very important message to hear, just as I think if people said, safety is really important, and or there are other things I haven't even thought of. I mean, that's why I value the public input.
Well, I know it's an academic type of thing, but the people that will come to that public meeting will be the people that want it. The people that the ordinary person will, it's happened many, many times, whether it's Lowe's or Walmart or any of these. The people that didn't want it came to the meeting. The people that didn't care one way or the other didn't come to the meeting. So, and it's going to happen the same way right here. I'm not saying it's democracy, I understand, but I also understand that you're going to get people that want it will be there. The people who don't care won't be there.
Okay, Mr. Scarborough.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to offer an alternative motion that we authorize the town planner to go ahead and publish unconditionally a public hearing so we can hear what the people of the town of Plymouth have to say.
Well, that would be, is that a friendly motion that would be accepted by Mr. Ahern, who made the original motion?
What exactly are we adding, and what are we taking away from the present motion?
It had been your discussion about the non-contribution to town money. As we've already noted, if the thing goes through, it's going to be turned over to the town. So we're going to ultimately be paying for it.
Yeah, Mr. Ahern, your motion, as I recall, stipulated that there would be no town of Plymouth funds spent on this. And we heard that there's a contradiction in terms of the way the money has to be spent to get reimbursed. And Mr. Scarborough is just trying to remove that so that we hear what the public has to say, if I have characterized that correctly.
Correct.
You can have the check written on town funds, but as long as it's reimbursed from an outside private source,
right,
it could be done, I imagine. I'd like to ensure that the funds are there from private sources before the town decides to write a check.
Could I make a suggestion that
Yes.
that that if we accept Mr. Scarborough's friendly amendment and move forward that way, that you always have the opportunity to make the motion, and I would definitely recognize you first, that after we hear a public, have a public hearing, if we were to move forward, that we, at that point, stipulate how we think funding should work. But to stipulate it before we've even had a public meeting sounds like putting the cart in front of the horse to me.
Maybe I could rephrase it, that those that vote in favor of this motion to have a public hearing would like to see alternatives studied that would somehow help reimburse the town if there were funds that were to be spent.
Could we say that we could have a public hearing with a stipulation that if the public wanted to go along with this project, at that time, we would have to have private contributions for the $52,000, whatever the figure is. In other words, you have the public hearing, you hear what people have to say, but at that point, you would then, after the public hearing and everything like that, at that point, you would have to be guaranteed by private people to refund the town of Plymouth the $52,000 that we would have to, that the town would have to spend. Is that what you're trying to say, Mike?
I think so.
Can you put that into a motion so that we're all clear
Or
on
also,
that?
could we have two, is it possible to do two motions? I mean, could we have one, should I publish for the public hearing, and then we'll do a second motion that has the funding? Because
That's essentially what Mr. Scarborough asked for, but Mr. Ahern and Mr. Kelly don't want to let go of the issue of funding.
Was the first motion seconded?
Yes, it was by Mr. Kelly. So, Mr. Ahern, are you accepting Mr. Scarborough's friendly amendment to do what the town planner just asked, which is to
We
raise
have
this
to vote
into...
on the regular one and then
I'd have
vote
to-
on the amendment.
Well, we have to find out if the friendly amendment's going to be accepted or not.
I think there's pressure here. So, we should just vote on Mike and then if we want to.
But if my motion doesn't make any sense because it would basically defeat it, correct? There's no way it could go on because the way that this money is set up is the town has to pay the money.
right, I mean, personally, for me, I would just like one motion about do I put it in the newspaper tomorrow or not, and then we'll do the second motion about the funding. But yeah, I mean, it'd be great if we can get private contributions, but my application has to go in September 15th. So I think what I'm hearing from you is that I've got to get a commitment from a private entity prior to September 15th.
Can I take another, is it possible to take another stab at it?
Sure.
Sure. We'll consider it you clarifying Mr. Scarborough's friendly amendments, and if we all like, and if Mr. Kelly likes what you say, then we'll vote on it, yes or no.
I would make a motion that we would have a public hearing in 2 weeks, that we would, that there are major reservations about the town having to foot the 20% portion, and that we should work to get cooperation with all property owners involved.
Mr. Kelly, do you accept that revised amendment?
I'm not the board.
No, but you were the seconder of the original motion, and if you refuse this, then we have to vote on the original motion. So if you accept Mr. Ahern's restatement of that motion, we can move forward.
Okay with you, Mike? I don't know. You understand what you're saying?
No.
Does the town planner want to reread what is being considered by Mr. Kelly for the second?
Okay, so what I have is move to have a public hearing, but there are major reservations about the town paying 20%, and we should work to get cooperation from all the property owners involved.
That's what I said.
So maybe what you're asking is for there to be a public hearing on this plan and whether it should be funded by public funds.
Town funds.
Yeah, so that would be appropriate in the public hearing for have the audience speak to both parts of that motion.
Okay, so, I'm sorry, move to have a public hearing on August 20th, and then have a discussion, right? We
But
put
a discussion of this plan and should it be funded with public funds?
Town funds.
Town funds, excuse me, thank you.
Okay, is that how I should put it in for the public hearing? Do you want that to appear?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Kelly, is that acceptable to you?
Yep.
Is there any further discussion of Mr. Ahern's motion?
Just one thing, I would like to make a statement, not that this, when was this proposed? The first time was it proposed? Years and years ago?
Okay, didn't I just?
It's over here.
Around 2006. And maybe 2006 it was rehashed. I mean, did that come from something, or it started in
That was
2006?
a planning grant they got.
Okay.
And
I guess what I'm saying.
Okay, so 2006 we had, professional engineers.
From
look at it.
2006 until 2009, and all of a sudden we only got a week to do it.
We've
Just
also
a statement.
only had 20% of the money.
Oh,
it seems
right.
like.
In 2006, there was a grant to write that study, so they did a comprehensive study. They haven't had transportation enhancement grant since 2004, so there's been a gap. I got informed by North Country Council, they said you got 2 weeks, so, for the
Okay.
letter of intent, so.
So any further discussion? All in favor of this motion to move this to public hearing in 2 weeks with a discussion of the merits of this proposal, including how it's funded? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. After a lot of hard work, huh? Okay. Agenda item number 8, unfinished and other business. Does anybody have any other business or anything left unfinished? Number 9, public comments. Yes,
Yeah,
Mr.
one.
Miller.
as far as this previous thing you decided, as far as the abutters paying any part of that, I would believe it would probably be in lieu of, because if they have to give any right-of-way or functions of their property, like Steve ran, they would probably say that's their payment. So cash value-wise, I don't think you're going to see much. Roads, parking lots, sidewalks are we, us, and ours type of events, especially in the village commercial zone. If you want to I, me, and mine, in other words, having a proponent design and pay for something, usually out into areas like the agricultural zone, where you have lots of land and you do setbacks. But in this village commercial zone, there are a lot of infrastructure items that, because of our zoning regulations that were designed in 1961, weren't made allowed for. So we're stuck here in 2009 having to pay for infrastructure improvements that we're working very close proximity to a lot of boundary lines, and actually people become accustomed of using a piece of way that actually belongs to a private party. And so we now sort of think it's ours, but it's not. And if anybody's tracked and followed a lot of the surveying properties of the railroad property areas from the 1800s to the 1900s, it's been very difficult for the town to determine exactly what part of the roads and ways will be the town obligated to maintain, and where are they exactly. And a good point was it took us 12 years to determine where and who owned what by the lucky dog. As far as actually getting those 4 parties, because there's only 4 parties to this area we're talking, to come up with those monies, I don't see that happening between now and September 15th. But again, I think we need to look at a bigger picture of in the downtown enclosed confines and compact area. We just paid $1.2 million for a drainage system on Main Street. Nobody drives into town and says, boy, what a nice $1 million drain system you got. We, the people, still paid for it. And I don't know how you get around trying to get private monies to fund that. This particular project, I was actually leaning very heavily word-wise in our justification and word picture. The state fessed up and acknowledged that they were impacting our roadway, Green Street, by traffic flows, and that they had offered to fix the railroad crossing, which is the most safe, problematic area as far as safety because of its condition. It's not a crossing for pedestrians, and especially in wheelchairs, walkers, canes, whatever. It's just not. So I think they have an obligation, the state, to fund that. That's the big ticket item. But I don't believe these 4 members that I know of will personally finance this improvement by themselves.
Any other comments from the public? Yeah, so I just wanted to finish that off. Mr. Ahern?
And I don't think I was looking for all the money from the 4 butters right in that area. There was mention of the common man. They might be able to benefit somehow, and I was hoping that there was talk about private money coming in, and that's, I guess, more I was thinking that. Maybe a little bit other people might find some advantage to doing it. And so it'd be money not from just 1 or 2 individuals, but more than one. And there's definitely some advantages to other people to help chip in.
Yeah.
One other item before we get to number 10, it's just occurred to me, there was some discussion of making sure that the abutters of this project are notified officially. Is it the board's sense that that should happen so nobody's caught off guard?
Most definitely.
Yeah. So if we can direct the town planner to notify them.
Sure. So send like certified mail. Certified letter or call or...
Actually, both might work. That way they get it quickly.
Be adequate.
Okay.
Call?
First class.
No.
First class?
Yeah.
Okay.
How many are you talking about?
Oh, just 4.
How much is that going to cost?
I can do certified. Certified's
Yeah.
fine. I just...
And a call that is coming.
I'll do all the abutters.
Go all the way up.
Oh, go all the way up.
Because you're going to get people in this neck of the woods that are affected as well. Even a little bit, I would let them know as early as you know.
Yeah, a little call that says you can expect a letter saying that we're having a public meeting. Okay, any other on agenda item 9.5, extra unfinished business? Yes, Ms.
I just want to mention, I just want to make sure that he got what he needed from us, our input, and
Thank you. That's great. Mr. Ahern, you usually take charge at number 10.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Passes by acclamation.
Consensus by bladder.